Hey everybody, welcome back. Another opportunity for the Sales Hacker and Vendition team to collaborate. I love doing these. There's so many different nuggets we can take away and have access to. Real quick, just on our topic, we're going to talk about onboarding, and specifically SDR onboarding. And we're going to give you 5 key components that more than likely is missing from your onboarding strategy right now. So we've got a lot of content to cover. So do me a favor. I'd love for this to be interactive. I'd love for you to jump in, ask questions. Most importantly, to get even granular, we're going to be talking about the process and the framework of onboarding. So if you're like me, you're one of those leaders who like to talk about the training, the specifics of what to cover. That's for another time. I even let you know a little secret. We're possibly preparing something to have a conversation around those details. But right now, it's about the framework. We got to start there, right? So hopefully you already have some information you can kind of just dump in. And if not, we'll be able to help you along the way. Enough about me. Again, I'm Brian. I am the Revenue Manager at Vendition. I have the awesome opportunity of being a part of that team. I'm going to introduce you to our panelists, starting with my boss, my friend, the OG, the homie, Hannah.
That is the best intro I've ever had. Thank you. My name is Hannah Elliott. Thanks y'all for joining. My official title is VP Revenue at Vendition. We help folks from all different backgrounds launch successful careers in tech sales, really specializing in the SDR world. We screen 30,000 SDRs a year. So this is something that I really, really care deeply and passionately about. What my title means in actuality is I do support our sales team, our marketing team, our partner success team. I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee. And fun fact, I got LASIK yesterday and I can see clearly everything around me.
I can see clearly now. Okay, let me stop. Colin, what's up, man? Colin's, y'all love Colin. Colin, I go way back. I'm sure y'all know who he is. If you don't, you should. Colin, what's up? Introduce yourself, man.
Thanks, Brian. It's good to see you and everybody else here. Usually I'm in the host seat. Usually I'm sitting where you're sitting, Brian. So I lead the sales hacker community. So it's interesting for me to be here as a panelist. It's bringing me back to my days when I ran an account team at a marketing agency. It's bringing me back to all the conversations I've had with sales dev leaders and enablement leaders about how SDR onboarding should work, how it's sometimes broken. So I'm psyched for this conversation. It's going to be pretty fun. And also, by the way, just to double down on Savannah's point, I will be at those roadshows she mentioned. So if you want to meet up with me and some other sales managers, sales leaders in those cities, I don't know, reach me on LinkedIn. I'll get you the information you need.
We appreciate it, Colin. Last and certainly not least, my man, the homie, TikTok famous, Eddie. What's up, man? How you doing?
Brian, thanks for that. We're getting there on TikTok. You know, my name's Eddie Cortez, based here out of Los Angeles. I have a passion for the SDR position as I clawed and fight my way into the tech with untraditional background, without experience, and I know how difficult it is. So I passionately coach and mentor SDRs on a daily basis across multiple tech companies. I love what I do. Super excited to be here and talk about SDR onboarding as I hold it near and dear to my heart. So let's get into it.
Love it. Just to reiterate a couple different things. Make sure you take notes. We're going to make sure you get a worksheet to be able to fill out and actually create an onboarding plan for your SDRs here in this hour. Super, super valuable. And then the last thing, don't forget, you can submit that to Mikey's email to get a Sales Hacker t-shirt that is just perfect for the spring weather. I'm in Florida, so it depends on where you're at. It's nice and sunny here. We got 70 degrees. So definitely t-shirt weather, as I like to call it. And then the last thing, please, again, just be interactive with us. We love questions. We love to answer your questions. We're doing this for you to be able to better equip you. So let's get to it. We got a lot of stuff to cover. So we're here, right, because onboarding matters. It matters because there's so many things happening in our environment, in our industry, right, in our hiring efforts, and because things are like changing constantly, and then even just with the pandemic a couple of years back, how it's affected how we've gone hiring, onboarding matters. It's always mattered. It's officially making a difference now. It's simple, right? You have a bad onboarding experience, more than likely you're going to have a bad experience within the company. Great experience equals great experience with the company. My biggest thing as a leader within revenue is it's a missed opportunity on revenue. It's the main thing while we're all here, right? Is to help companies build revenue. So that's the key thing. I love to just jump right into it. The biggest things we're going to talk about today, right? We've got 5 key components. And I'll just give you those really quick, right? So number 1, we're going to focus on the first 90. 2, stand in the place that you work. 3, strength and differences. 4, channel your inner teacher. And then last but not least, humanity, connection, and emotion. Let's start with the very first one. So focus on the first 90. I love this one because Vendition, a lot of our model and just what we do is hyper-focused around the first 90 days, the importance of it for the success of a rep. So I love to just jump into it. Let's talk about it. Han, I love to kick it over to you when we talk about, creating a 30, 60, 90-day plan. Is there anything you'd love to just share with us around people who are getting ready to create this onboarding experience? What are some things we should think about when we talk about a 30, 60, 90-day plan?
Yeah, one thing as someone who is in a leadership position, but also like really super engaged in hiring and bringing new folks on our team all the time, is I know just like very intimately how common and easy it is to go in with great intentions about having new employees join the team. But when just the hustle of everyday work, the whirlwind comes into play, I have people texting me about deals. I have new campaigns launching, all of this stuff. If I don't put some very key things into play before I get started, I know I'm going to deprioritize that. And I mean, we see it happen to customers before we start working with them. But all of the time, right? Like it's easy to go into having a new employee come on with great intentions and then just get caught up in the whirlwind of everyday work, trying to hit your numbers, trying to hustle on calls and meetings, and letting it get deprioritized. So 30, 60, 90s are something that is hard to set aside time to do before, but so critical to actually putting into place. And I think my biggest and easiest thing to do here is the second I have a start date for a new employee and an email address, I'm going ahead on the calendar and putting in a meeting for us at their 30-day mark, 60-day mark, 90-day mark. It sounds so simple, but it's one of those things that if I don't do, I'm going to just totally deprioritize.
Yeah, I love it. It's interesting when we have milestones in place, like the difference it makes when hey, I've got to talk about this thing. I think for someone that is leading and then someone that else is reporting, right? Hey, I've got to be able to report on this stuff. It also, I think, encourages ownership when you do those different milestones at 30, 60, 90. Let's throw it over to, let's talk about feedback loops real quick. We get this briefly. One of the biggest things I've found out around feedback loops is when my boss just honestly just allows the space for it, right? One of the things we do a lot of at Vendition is the minute we get on a meeting, we do kind of a mental check-in, just like, how are you doing, right? And so to me, I think people overthink feedback loops. To me, that's a feedback loop, right? It's giving me the opportunity to be able to be my whole self. And so love to just chat through this. I love for anybody to take this. Eddie, I know you work with a lot of SDRs. Colin, you've been a leader over time. Love to just jump in if you have anything you can share about just the importance of when we're thinking about the first 90, creating a feedback loop. What are some things you do, seen, heard of? Love to share.
I think so. I'll just jump in with my basic approach here is having not onboarded SDRs myself before, but having onboarded a lot of employees. The important thing I think is to start giving some kind of valuable feedback early, because when you hold it back, everybody wants their new employees to feel like they're getting some wins, and you do have to build in some easy, quick wins for your folks so they feel like a champ as they're learning, because it can be a real slog trying to learn how to do the job. The SDR is a hard job. But you don't want to make it feel like all wins, because when you start poking holes later on, it's going to feel even more damaging. It's going to feel even more negative. So you want to create the sense of psychological safety and prep them for feeling good getting feedback as part of the learning process early. So, call coaching, whether it's from you or like a buddy or a mentor, we'll talk about that later on, I think. But call coaching is something that you want to start with early.
Excellent. To piggyback off that, I really love that, Colin. Now, something that comes to mind to me quickly is within, those 90 days, really moves quickly. So it's all about building trust with your reps right out the gate, right? Spending some time and really building trust with those SDRs, those sales professionals, so that when things aren't going right, they can get vulnerable with you, so that they can come to you when there's challenges. So they're not looking at you as just a manager, but also as a mentor, as somebody who can help them get out of that. Because I see too many times where SDRs are afraid to come to their leadership and admit that they're failing. So having that trust, knowing that the best interest, your managers have your best interest in mind is really key. So I definitely want to start there and building trust with my reps, knowing that they can come to me with anything, and then giving them the space to do so, like Hannah mentioned.
I love it. Really quick, hey, let's pause, right? We got a couple of questions. I love the answer. Again, today will be about the process and the framework, not necessarily the details of what we do within it. We want to give you the framework of how you can set up a great onboarding experience, specifically 5 components within that we think and that we've seen most companies are missing. So let me jump into this first question really quick, if you don't mind. Do you have an ideal balance for your schedule as a revenue leader around how you carve out time for focusing on ops, onboarding feedback versus hiring and interviews for new talent? So basically, as a revenue leader, how are you managing your time with the details amongst the actual job of interviewing and talent? I can't wait to hear this because it's hard. That's why you asked it. So.
And Vaughn, I feel like maybe we have a lot to talk about afterwards, so I'll try to connect with you. But I think I'm not sure that I have a great answer for the balance, and maybe the answer is that there is no balance. It just kind of depends on the day and where I'm needed most at any given point. But I will say my number one focus for where I spend my time is always my teammates, the people that I work with. And so when possible, I try to stick to my one-on-ones without fail. I try to stick to my team meetings without fail. And then as far as the other things, it just kind of depends on the day, how close we are to end of month, end of quarter, et cetera, et cetera. But Vaughn, again, maybe we can spend some more time talking about this after.
Real quickly, I'll just add to, I know Colin put some stuff in the chat for feedback. I don't think there's anything that should be stagnant in that aspect, right? I think that changes, like Hannah was saying, right? It depends on a lot of different things. So when the time is available for you to double down on your people, do it. When the time's available for you to double down on your process, do it. But there's context within that time of the month, right? Like, it's the end of the month, start of a quarter. Are you just now hiring a bunch of people? Are you not? So there's not a one way to do that. The most important thing is just whenever you have that time, pick one of those and focus on it, and then focus on the other. Sweet.
So look, can I jump in there, Brian?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I'll speak for myself. One of the things that held me back from designing a really good onboarding plan was always that I felt like I had to get it perfect. And if I couldn't get it perfect, then I just put it off. Like, I don't have time to do the perfect plan. So that's why I love that we're having people fill out these sheets in like an hour with some ideas. A useful framework for me for getting around that has been the Eisenhower Matrix, which is a 2x2 grid of urgent and important. You just group your tasks, and you will often find that your people-oriented tasks fall under the higher importance section of the chart. And there are a lot of things that are always going to be urgent, but aren't always super important. So it just helps you kind of break things up, so you aren't comparing every priority to every other competing priority. Puts you in buckets. I'll drop a link to that Eisenhower Matrix in the chat for anybody who's interested.
Yeah, I love that matrix. It's crazy such simple things like make such a big impact as that. Let's see. Got a couple more. One of the biggest struggles right now is figuring out the right order of operations for teaching. Any suggestions on the best approach? Is it better to start with systems and tools and then get into product knowledge and disco calls after? Or is it the product, talk tracks, calling better to do right up front and then get into those systems and processes after? So I want to keep this question. I think we're going to get to it a little bit later around the teaching aspect. So we'll circle back around and answer that then. And then there's one more. It looks like, do you have a mentorship program for SDRs? If so, are they mentored by AEs or other SDRs or both / another role? Would love to hear how you've built it and results you've seen. So I think the question is, within a company or in general, do you have a mentorship program for SDRs? If so, who are they mentored by?
Yeah, so I could take that question. Here at Vendition, essentially, they're mentored by us coaches here, a member of the coaching team. So we have very talented coaches, very diverse yet deep sales backgrounds. And we work directly with the SDRs as they are currently working alongside their actual companies. So to answer your question, it's essentially the coaching team who will be working closely with SDRs on a daily basis and one-to-one as well as in group sessions.
Sweet. And then the last one, looks like, do you have a feedback loop form that you share with enablement? Maybe give us a little bit more insight into, I know what you're asking, but also want to make sure we speak specific to that. So do you have a feedback loop that you share with enablement? So I'm guessing that's an opportunity for you to share where the rep is currently in their ramping. Angelina, if you want to clarify that, that'd be super great. Sweet. Perfect. Let's move to the next thing. So just to recap that really quick, the first aspect or the first component is focusing on your first 90. And that's maximizing that opportunity that you have in that 90 days is super critical. That takeaway should be about a timeline and plan for your SDRs to not only learn, but also have wins and thrive and have success as they're learning. This job is a great opportunity for people to get wins as they're learning. I think most of us honestly learn on the job. A classroom setting is great, but having that ability to actually learn and produce in a job is perfect. So next thing we're going to talk about, stand in the place that you work. So,
hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Brian, can I take us back one question about, if we can go back one slide? Colin had shared a cool example about practice skills, and it was just a cool one. I just wanted to call out Colin and say, hey, do you mind sharing that example?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Hannah. I almost completely forgot. So at Outreach, and some of you may have heard this. This is from Sam Nelson. He's an SDR leader that's been out at Outreach. And he has this idea to kind of rip the Band-Aid off for cold calling. And so cold calling being the new skill you want to practice immediately. But what you don't want to do with someone brand new is put them on the phone with a potentially really high value customer. So he designed a program where brand new SDRs were tasked with trying to sell a pizza. So they would call prospects in our list, and I don't know exactly what the script was, but I think it was probably more or less like, "Hey, this is kind of weird, but I want to sell you a pizza." And obviously, if people said yes, we would pay for it and send them the pizza. The idea here is that you don't have to copy this exact idea if it's not going to work for your target audience. But the idea here is it gets them calling, it gets them into some really awkward and hard conversations. And if you can sell them something that's as kind of strangely transactional and out of the blue as a pizza, then you might be able to sell them something that's more relevant to their business and your business, like the solution that they're actually selling.
I'm all for trying new stuff. I think I don't know if this is good to use, but I always have this saying, innovate or die. It's just the way it is. You have to constantly A/B test everything, try new opportunities. Eddie, you want to jump in at all right before we move on to the next thing, just around, practice new skills immediately? You're on TikTok, you're doing things that seem to be forward thinking around the industry. So I'd love to hear from you too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think essentially it's right teaching behaviors, right? Teaching the behaviors, reinforcing them um, with small micro goals, and then making sure that the reps are actually taking the leap and then diving right in right away with the new skill that they learn. So it's all about creating. Obviously we want to get outcomes, but also creating those small micro goals in place to show that the progress is being made. And then this game is all about the application, right? Practice, practice, practice. So making sure that as coaches we're holding them accountable to getting their practice in. So definitely want to create that environment where we can do so. So 100%, it's you need to learn the skill and then do it right away to actually have it take place.
Great, appreciate that. I'm glad we talked about that. Didn't want to miss that. That's definitely key and important. I'm being aware of time. Let's talk about, right, what does it mean to stand in the place that you work in a remote and hybrid environment? I would say a remote and hybrid dominated environment. We're seeing work with so many partners, helping place SDRs up. Hybrid and remote are winning for sure when it comes to the best talent. And so, you have to adopt, you have to be innovative now in how you're thinking about your onboarding approach. So love to talk about right now, what does it look like to provide the same experience for all of your SDRs if you're having to hire them all throughout the country, all throughout the world, throughout the state, wherever you're hiring your SDRs. A lot of companies are having to spread out their SDRs. Hannah, I'd love to throw it over to you first, just on the experience right now, right? You've hired a couple of SDRs recently. You're also the head of revenue at Vendition. So you're helping us bring in our partners or leading that. Love for you to share just a little bit about what does it mean now to hire on board from anywhere?
Man, I think the first thing I'd start with is not even a direct answer to that question, but more so, we're working with thousands and thousands of SDRs every year. And it should be no surprise to everyone that the vast majority of people who are looking for sales development roles right now are looking specifically for remote roles. And it's interesting because a lot of our hiring partners and companies out there, I think from what I can tell, a lot of folks who are on the call right now are excited about going back into the office and at least doing hybrid, if not fully in office. But the key word there is the word back, right? For all of us who have been around for a second, we know what an office environment is like. We know, what the buzz on a sales floor can do and what the benefits of looking over someone's shoulder while you're learning. We understand that, but for a lot of SDRs, especially those who are coming out of college or haven't been in the workforce for too long, there is no back to them, right? And so just something to consider for all of our hiring partners out there. You're going to be a much more competitive hiring partner in a very wild and insane hiring environment if you are equipped to work with remote SDRs. I think the biggest thing for me that I've seen Miguel, who's our incredible SDR manager at Vendition, do is I'll probably say this a billion times today, but just setting extremely unarguably clear goals, and not just the big goals, like I need you to set, 10 meetings next week, but also what are those micro goals along the way, those key leading indicators that let him know that he's helping his team build the habits to actually reach those bigger goals. Each of those little checkpoints is what helps him keep his team on board. And I've seen it start to work with our team.
Yeah, I love it. And again, write these down for the worksheet you're going to get, right? The 3 things that, and I know we got some people in the chat helping out, just some guidance, but you're going to get that worksheet. We'll drop the link again in the chat if you didn't see it to be able to download the worksheet. But within stand in the place that you work, we're going to talk about a few different things that we just had up on a slide. So Hannah just mentioned a little bit about what we do, and Miguel leading this team. I love to just talk about, I think a lot of people do this. Now, if you can speak to it, Colin or Eddie, just about assigning a buddy. I think that's so important. Every company I've been a part of, I'm laughing because I had experience with a company where I didn't have that. It actually turned into a friendship because of how mad I got because I didn't have that buddy. So when I would ask a question, I'd turn into the Hulk, and then they started picking at me because I turned into the Hulk. Sorry, it's another story for another time. I love having a hiring buddy. Would love for any of you to take that, Colin, Eddie. Let's maybe chat about some things that you expect for that hired buddy to do within that relationship of onboarding an SDR.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Colin, I'll jump in quickly and then hand it back to you. Having somebody to start day one with is key, right? A lot of the time you're learning a new skill. A lot of the time you're probably feeling some of the same emotions. So being able to be vulnerable with somebody else who's going through exactly what you're going through is key, right? I had some of my best relationships today who I met for like in previous onboarding cohorts, and they become my best friends just because we were battling together and learning a new skill, failing together, and also winning together. So that's super huge, right? Having that co-pilot along to do that. Then also assigning additional co-pilots as you continue and progress, right? Whether that's internal or finding external mentors. So always building your network is definitely key there. Colin, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, we've played with this at Outreach and other companies I've been at, and the program has taken different shapes and evolved over time, as I think it should. My favorite phase of the evolution when I was onboarding was everybody was assigned a different buddy from a different department. So in sales, you always onboard with a cohort at Outreach. So you're already starting with people you can consider your peers. You're going to connect in both professional ways to review calls together, but also casually, so you can build some camaraderie. But every individual also had an outreach buddy from any other department. And that was somebody that you could ask questions about, culture or, the product or marketing, or who do I talk to figure out, my pay stub, things like that. So it didn't always only flow up through your manager, and it gives you some kind of greater connection to other parts of the company. In the early days, it's just great for getting questions answered. Over time, it's great for giving people more context about the environment in which they're working, because context is what's going to allow them to make decisions, smart decisions. In the beginning, they're not making decisions. They're just following the playbook and trying to learn. But later on, they will be making decisions, and they may become a manager someday. So you want them to know something about how the rest of the company works. And that's, I think, done really well through those kinds of informal relationships.
Love it. It's like it was a mic drop moment between you and Eddie. It's like you guys are practitioners or something. I don't know. Next thing I'd love to talk about, right, in a remote environment, we're not in the office anymore necessarily. We may be there from time to time. And so it makes you wonder, right, how do you create materials and give access to things that help influence, speed up that onboarding experience and just the quality of experience. So like maybe talk to me about how you would create tech-friendly materials during that onboarding experience for SDRs.
Yeah, this is a good one here. So tech-friendly materials would be something that's easy to collaborate on, right? It could be as simple as a Google Doc where everybody's invited and they're collaborating on. Also leveraging additional tools, similar to like Zoom or Google Meet, whatever it may be, but promoting something where you are giving your team a space to actually collaborate together on. So using technology to leverage and create a quote unquote bullpen atmosphere, right? If you're working fully remote, that's key, right? Penciling out some time on everybody's calendar and initiating that is definitely a great tool. There's plenty of tools out there that you can leverage to do that, but it's definitely important to start early.
Yeah, one of the things that I love, I think the biggest thing is creating docs that can be, that can demonstrate iterations of version 1, version 2. I think it's important for people that are onboarding with a company to maybe see where things were or where they started and where they are now. I think one of my favorite things to do is get into a doc that just looks all messy and just crazy because people have put a bunch of things in it, but it helps you understand the framework from the very beginning to where it was. if you're analytical like me, you start thinking, you start at the end and then reverse back. And so you can get stuck with something that's already been figured out. So anything that you can do to demonstrate the progression of materials that you're doing, or even just keeping, old versions in a separate doc so they can go there first and then updated versions after that. I think that's a super, super versatile way to build materials within your company. We talked about develop a cohort. I need to look at the questions, Q&A, sweet. We talked a little bit about developing a cohort, and we talked about assigning a buddy. I don't know if we want to elaborate just a little bit more on what it takes to develop a cohort, what we look for. Maybe we can talk about what wins, or how do we measure, what it looks like to have a successful cohort. What are some things you look for? And I'm not looking for hardcore data, but just as a leader, naturally, when you look at, hey, this team that's onboarding this cohort, what are some signs you're looking for?
I'm always looking for engagement, especially in remote first environments. When I have new team members joining, I can very easily tell the difference between the comfort levels of speaking up in remote first environments, where when people are joining and starting at the same time as somebody else, anywhere in the org, regardless of if it's on the sales team or a different team, versus the ones who are starting by themselves. So I would say that's a critical component. And if you're hiring only one person, you don't have a cohort, I think you have a couple of external options, external mentor options that can make somebody feel like they're going through something with somebody else that you can turn to. And I would say too, with both cohorts and a buddy system internally, those are things that, again, if I'm hiring a new, especially a new sales development rep, which are usually earlier in career, I'm putting each of those meetings and conversations on the calendar before their first day. It takes extra time, but those are the kinds of things that are going to slip and that are absolutely critical to success for someone who is either new to this career or switching into this career. Within that first 90 days, they've got to have those buddy, cohort, and mentor, not to mention their sales manager meetings already booked on the calendar.
That's a great point, Hannah. It really shows, like, you're standard setting when you do that. Like, this is how we do things here. We're organized. We think ahead. We're not scrambling. I took the time to prepare your schedule for you. This is how we do things. We're professional. And so, they pick up on that. It's implied in the way that they're onboarding, makes them feel that they should make their colleagues and customers feel that way. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And, it may feel like a lot of work to put into developing these relationships and being really intentional about them in advance. But if you think about, an in-office environment, these are the kinds of conversations that are happening a little more naturally and organically when you're all in the same room. And so, my challenge is like, how do we mimic those relationships when we're all in different places? Certainly only connecting once a week on team call is not it, right? You still need some more human connection outside of that. And I know we'll get to that a little bit later, but.
We've got a little bit of time. Let's take a couple questions in between before we go to the next topic. There's a question: how much of the onboarding should be owned by the leader versus training/ops team? I know that gets into the weeds of things, but maybe what we could talk about, I'm not sure since it was anonymous, but maybe we can do this more around the framework of onboarding. So maybe you could talk about within your company and your perspective of, one, the context of how big your company is, but is it that you start the onboarding process, enablement finishes? Is it that enablement starts the process, you support? Maybe we could just talk about the framework of how that works. I know every situation is different, so it's not a one size fits all type thing. Some people don't even have an enablement team. So sometimes it's all the leader. But maybe we can talk about best case scenario.
I see Colin typing in there. I'm curious.
I was typing, yeah. I was just going to say what you said, Brian. I think it depends. I don't know if there's a good one answer for this, because you as the leader could develop your onboarding plan. And if you have an enablement team, they might go, hey, what the heck? We're stepping on our toes. We have this plan. If you don't like it, give us feedback and we'll tweak it. So I would say that in general, what I've seen is at smaller companies, it's entirely on the manager. And at larger companies, there's more structure. And usually kicks off with, a cohort-based enablement-led onboarding that then becomes a team. There's every sales leader is going to build some kind of cultural or team onboarding experience, whether it's formal or informal, complex or simple. There's something, like you join the first team meeting and there's a little ritual. And then over time, you'll have the enablement team come back and do knowledge and retention checks and continue to build on more and more skills. Yeah. That's how we do it at Outreach right now. And for context, we have over 1,000 employees. So it's almost led entirely by enablement at this point. And they've gone, segment specific, industry specific with the onboardings as well.
Colin, earlier you mentioned somebody asked about how to shadow remote SDRs. Colin gave an answer in the chat about Outreach having that ability. The Kaya, right?
Yeah, I am super biased here. So check out all the solutions. But Kaya is something you can use that records your team's calls. And it also gives them real-time enablement. So it's good for them too. It's not just like a Big Brother monitoring tool. But it can help you shadow either in real time or after the fact. Like you could end your day listening to 4 or 5 calls and Slack your new hires some tips.
Yeah.
Or Slack them in real time. So.
And this is a and thing, not an or thing, because I think you've got to have both. You've got to have conversation intelligence. But, one thing that we've been doing recently too is just, I can't remember, maybe Miguel can chat in. If it's the beginning of the day, I think it's the beginning of the day, we'll start our day with like an hour-long cold call session where we're on a Google Meet together with the entire SDR team, or like one group of your SDR team, depending on how big your team is. And when you get a response, when someone answers, when you get a bite, you go off mute and everyone's listening to you on your call. And it takes vulnerability, but that's what we're going for too, right? Like you want to hear people's real-time responses. And even if you're not doing a cold call blitz, even if you're doing like an email session or a LinkedIn session, we'll still have a Google Meet that's just like running, or a Zoom that's just running. And so a lot of the time it is quiet, or we might be playing music or something, but it gives you FaceTime with the rest of the team. And when you get a challenging objection or response, it lets you just kind of bring it up right there so everyone can chime in to help out.
Yeah, one quick thing I'd like to add to that. There's tons of tools out there, as Colin mentioned. Figure out what tool works best for you, what company stage, right? But the most important thing is capture those call recordings any way possible, because those are key tools to your skill development. So if your team is listening to not only their calls, but other people's calls as well, you're going to see the skill set accelerate like a lot faster than normal because they're learning from other people as well. And I've used those plenty of times on my coaching calls, and it's just super, super valuable. So implementing that early as possible is going to be key. Like I'm talking from like day one, listening to successful scheduled calls, listening to objection handling from other reps who are actually doing it. It just makes a big difference. So figure out what works best for you as far as like a tool perspective, but you just need to get a hold of those call recordings as soon as possible.
Sweet. Sorry, I was having trouble with my mute button. So just recapping this again, a lot of this is just about making sure that everybody has a great experience and the same experience regardless of where they are sitting, right? Where their laptop, their desk, anything they're utilizing in their day-to-day job. All these things will help you reassure that everybody has the same experience, right? And so when everybody's having the same experience, it's easier to measure when you need to be more active from an employee engagement standpoint. So make sure you have this framework written down, all these things. Let's move to the next topic for the sake of time. Probably one of my favorite topics I'm excited to talk about is strength indifference. It's one of my favorite because I'll be real with you, like my introduction into the SDR world was a little tough. It was hard. I was reaching out to CFOs. It's a whole other conversation about how tough it is to break into CFOs. But weave it in diversity in a lot of different ways, right? Is what we're going to talk about, how you add that to your onboarding process. Because I'm almost willing to bet, and we've seen that a lot of companies right now aren't utilizing this as an onboarding subject. And so I think it's key. I think it's important. Colin, I think it's no secret that outreach, for sure, diversity is important to you guys. I'd love to kick it off to you. When we talk about hiring for diversity, give us a little insight just from outreach's background, what you believe, how you go about it, all of that good stuff.
So outreach, in my experience, is one of the few companies where the values written on the wall, so to speak, or the website, are the values you actually feel. And one of our values is that we find strength in diversity. So I can't even really begin to list all the ways that plays itself out. But in terms of, well, I'll tell you a lesson I learned the hard way recently. I have to get a little vulnerable for this because it was kind of it was a learning experience for me. I was talking to my recruiter about some roles we had open, and she was talking to me about this. And she wanted to make sure that I could build a team of people with diverse backgrounds, experiences, beliefs, so that we're stronger together. And my tagline was always, I'm absolutely going to hire the best candidate. And then I was talking about that with another member of my team who happens to be Black. And he said to me, that's not, you got to be careful with that phrase. Because in his experience, hire the best candidate means hire the person that fits the cookie cutter mold. And it doesn't take into the account the things that you can't see on a resume and can't pick up just if you looked at like the questions and answers in an interview. It's too easy to not take into account that the person's upbringing may have made them stronger or more adaptable or more creative. So that's kind of a lesson I learned, that phrase and that mindset, hire the best candidate, often falls short of helping you find the people who are going to bring diversity to your team. I know I'm not really talking about onboarding here, but I thought it was important to share that lesson.
I think it has to do with onboarding, right? Because it starts where you're saying, right? Like it starts with the conversation of, hey, I need to hire somebody, right? And the best person. So, in my opinion, I think it does start there, Colin. Like the more teams can focus that, like, if we don't start here, then ultimately we may not get here. Studies show without a diverse team or the lack of a diverse team, teams perform way better when they have a diverse set of people joining their team. Love to just talk about, if anybody else wants to dive in on that hire for diversity, feel free. Otherwise, we'll jump to explore cluster hiring.
I'll say, one thing that we see, I say this in the interest of helping anyone on this call who's hiring for SDRs now or in the near future. One thing that we hear from our thousands of SDR candidates that we speak to all the time is that knowing that they're joining diverse organizations is also really important to this crew of people who are moving into sales development and who are going to be the future of our sales field. And so, that's, not only is hiring diverse teams the right thing to do, but it's also going to help you build a really strong organization. It's going to get you the best talent out there because that's what everyone's looking for in this crop of sales development representatives that are currently looking to join other companies. It's very, very clear feedback we get from our talent pool.
Yeah, and lastly, if I can jump in, I hold this real near and dear to my heart because this really speaks to my personal story. Coming from Northeast LA, Mexican kid trying to break into the tech world without a 4-year degree. Good luck, right? Is extremely difficult, extremely difficult. So, some of the best people, if you can look outside of the resume, right? What kind of life skills have they developed, right? And we all talk about grittiness, right? Well, nothing's more gritty than somebody who has to put food on the table for their family while they're going, just going to high school, right? So there's plenty of opportunities in diversity, right? Looking outside of the resume, having a life experience, because you'll find some people really go through quite a bit, and that translates quite well in sales, right? I mean, just handling objections all day long, getting told no. I mean, that's a walk in the park for some people that I talk to, right? Just because they have that life experience. So, something to take in consideration. But you got to do it intentionally, right? You got to do it not because it's the right thing. Honestly, you got to do it intentionally. So make sure that you're looking for those behaviors, right? You're looking for those stories, implement those into your process, because you're really looking for some really quality people outside of the resume if you do that. And I'll stop there because I can talk about this all day. But thanks, guys.
I think the other thing too is not just about hiring, but like what happens after you hire, right? You have to deliver on those commitments that you made up front to get talent in the door. And so, does that mean making sure that you have ERGs or employee resource groups in place? Does that mean that you have ongoing conversations internally that are very open and direct about diversity in place? I think it'll look different to every organization, but as you're looking at all of your materials that you're putting together for onboarding, as you're working with your sales managers and ops teams, be really honest with each other and make sure you have an accountability partner who's reading your words and making sure that they're not speaking to a certain profile of candidate who may have, had a certain educational background or not had a certain educational background, or any of those different ways that diversity can show up in our teams, making sure that the language that we're using is inclusive and welcoming to all people that are joining our organization is how we can actually continue to walk out this notion of building diverse teams as well.
I love it. Hey, and make sure you're paying attention to the chat as well as follow along and listening with us. There's some great stuff happening in the chat. It's one of my favorite things. It's the side conversation. We at the dinner table. Anyway, make sure you're looking in the chat. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Lisa just dropped some things to help you out with filling out your worksheet to build this onboarding framework process. Intentionality is one of the things I'm hearing over and over from all three of the panelists. And as far as explore cluster hiring, if we want to just briefly chat on that just a little bit, I think we kind of covered it a little bit in some different ways, but if we can hit that really quick, we'll move on for the sake of time. I think the biggest thing though is just intentionality, and then having a plan afterwards once you make the hire is really key important. I love to just say, if you want to know more about that, if you want to see how we do that at Vendition, how we're actively doing that, just look at our sales team. It's a perfect example. Look at our company, company-wide. Same thing with outreach. We're both committed to it. Love to talk to you more about how we do that specifically with SDRs and even just our team in general. So connect with us on any of that good stuff. Exploring cluster hiring. Who would love to take that lovely topic to help our guests? People will be watching this just as far as when it comes to weaving in diversity into your onboarding. How do you think about exploring cluster hiring? Everybody speak at once. I'll jump in.
Go for it, B.
Sweet. I think the biggest thing for me is the creativity comes when there's people who have different ideas, right? Different backgrounds, different perspectives. I even make it from the aspect of if everybody's the jokester in the room when you're hiring, eventually everybody's gonna get tired of the jokes, right? And so when you have people that can balance out a team that bring different skill sets, different personalities, I think it helps balance out your team well. And when we think about SDRs ramping, right, the more comfortable they can be in their environment, the more they can bring their whole selves to the team, the better the SDR performs. So when you're hiring, and when you think about specifically within diversity, one of the biggest things that you'll benefit from is hiring in clusters. One we talked about earlier, right? pairs or hiring multiple people, they just work better together from a long-term standpoint in a relationship aspect. And then also, I could tell you, right, like some of the SDRs I've worked with, I've learned how to cold call because of them, right? Because of maybe the way they grew up and the way they communicated might have been different the way I communicated. You know, the way I may ask a question, how are you doing today? They may take a different approach, right? And so I think when you hire, when it comes to diversity standpoint in clusters, you get all those different skill sets and traits to the table. So it's important. Do it. Make it happen. Again,
Yeah.
I'll talk to you in more detail about it. Go ahead, Eddie.
Brian, just one real quick on this. You know, if you want to bring out the best of your SDRs, hire them to get in a cluster, right? You know, sometimes there's an SDR that will light it on fire early and it sets the bar quickly and makes everybody kind of raise their game to that. So, you know, it's great from the SDR side, but you want to get the best out of your people, you do it in a cohort, right? You make everybody put it out on the table and you do it early and you support them to collaborate. So we've seen plenty of times with success on our end of Vendition, and it's something that I continue to promote for anyone out there looking to hire. You definitely support your team in hiring clusters.
Sweet. Let's move on to the next topic. We got about 7 minutes left. Oh man, we got about 7 minutes left. So let's make sure we hit the last two topics. I'm a former teacher, so this is kind of special to my heart. Channel your inner teacher. Couple things we're going to talk about, right? Identify learning styles and then actually use them. Use pre and post assessment training, and then assign a mentor stat. So let's jump right in. You know, even though I love this topic, I love to just throw it to one of our panelists because it's not about me. Identify learning styles and then using them. Give us some examples, maybe some things, some benefits you've seen when not only when you identify learning styles, but actually use them. I don't want to throw you to the wolves, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but you've been pivotal in taking the time to learn how people learn, react, communicate. I think it's why you've been able to build a team so fast and stuff. I'm hyping you up for sure, but I truly mean it. How have you gone about to slow everything else down to hear and understand how people are learning and communicating in order to get the best out of what they can bring to the table? I'm not just asking you to put all your heart and stuff on the table and stuff, but
man, I wish I had a more like eloquent answer than just like listen. But I think that's just like at the heart of it. I think too, you know, one big learning for me as I've grown in my leadership journey has been never making assumptions about the way that I do things being the way that everyone else does things. And so if I see someone, and this speaks, I think Caroline asked a question, I was starting to type a response to it, but stopped. But it speaks to a question I think Caroline brought up is I think that when I started on this journey, I had this expectation that people would communicate in the same way that I would. And if they weren't, then maybe they weren't engaged or they weren't this, that, or the other. So it's been a huge learning for me. And Colin, actually, that's what I was going to bring up next too. I use a tool called Teaming to help me run my one-on-one relationships, but also meetings. And one of the first things it does when you log in is it asks you to take a really quick assessment. And so when I'm struggling in a relationship with somebody, or they're not catching on to something that I think that they should, or they're responding to me in a way that's like a little bit surprising, I'll go into the teaming assessment, which is based on DISC, and see if there are ways that like we're just two ships missing each other in the night because of our communication styles. And I definitely pull that into also like how I'm teaching. If I find that some people are drained by more direct face-to-face confrontation, then I'll try to lean more heavily on written to give them time to process, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll drop the link to Teaming in the chat too. But yeah, that's kind of how I look at it these days.
It's actually great. It's crazy to hear you talk about it, but also experience it. I think a big thing, right, is once you learn somebody's learning style, is doing everything you can to meet them within that learning style, and that takes work. You said you wish you had something more eloquent than listen, but I hate to say it, or maybe it's just reality. Listening sometimes is really hard when there's lots of other things and noise going on, especially if you're a startup or a company that's moving pretty fast. Um, we're talking about teaching using pre and post assessment training. Eddie, I don't know if you want to jump in at all here, right? You coach lots and lots of SDRs every month after month. I think you probably coach the most SDRs that I've met and I've met. So you want to chat a little bit about this and when it comes to onboarding SDRs?
Yeah, absolutely. This is extremely key to really identify what the outcome is. A lot of times you got to really start and understand, who your audience is when it comes to the SDRs that you hire, right? Are they learning a new skill for the first time, or are they seasoned vets, right? And are they learning to implement some context from your company and then kind of get out there and do it? So creating assessments for kind of both groups is going to be key, right? Getting them in the door, understanding, hey, this is the outcome, right? Identify, let's say it's an ICP, for example, right? Having them understand what the why is, right? In the very beginning, then let them take a shot, right? And then come in, provide some feedback, and then have them kind of take the assessment again so that they actually understand what they're looking for. So like leveraging these, baseline assignments early is great, right? And then for one, it shows like progress, right? It shows where you were and then, when you first started for those SDRs and where they are after from like a skill set perspective. So the most important thing is have these assessments in there so that it forces them to actually think in the right direction, and then continuing to look at their the development afterwards. Did they retain the information? Did they understand the information? All that can be done through pre and post assignment training. It's super effective from what I've seen and what we used on our end.
Wait. We got one more. How do you jump in really quick? Assign a mentor stat. We got about 1 minute. We'll cruise through the last one so that everybody gets out of here on time. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Was that to me?
Yeah. I
Oh,
was wondering
sorry.
if you wanted to add any color to assigning a mentor.
You know what? I don't really have anything to add that we haven't already talked about. However, having an unbiased third party, I say that and here I go adding something, but having an unbiased third party that's not your direct manager for some of these career switchers and more entry-level roles, I think roles can be a really pivotal thing because it can be scary to be vulnerable in your first in your first job if you're an entry-level SDR or a career switcher, and having somebody there who is not your direct manager who can help you work through how to bring up issues or challenges or keep an eye out on you is a really important thing. So encouraging SDRs to find that mentor, whether it's through their own personal network, your network, whether it's through one of, a program like Vendition, anything like that, then having that third party person we found has been critical to being able to catch those really early warning signs of when someone's struggling in this kind of role.
Last thing, Colin, I know you were 1 minute over time. Do you want to jump in and just talk to us about the humanity, connection, and emotion? I think you do a good job with anybody you interact with, but obviously helping SDRs feel connected from a authenticity standpoint within the company. I'd love for you to share about that.
Look, I think this has been an undercurrent to our entire discussion today. So we've already hit on a lot of these elements, but I'll drop some wisdom that I dropped in the chat earlier, which is a lesson that I had to learn the hard way, and hopefully none of you do. It is never urgent to be a good leader until it's too late. By the time you feel like, oh crap, I gotta, help this person, it's kind of too late. But it is always important. So when we think about that Eisenhower Matrix, and you think about how you prioritize your time, don't undersell yourself and don't undersell your new hires on this. remember, they're going to spend most of their waking hours with you. You're going to spend most of your waking hours with them. And you have to act as a team. You have to act as humans. Delegate responsibilities as early as you can, not just tasks. And make it a fun, challenging, and supportive work environment. I think that's the best way I would sum up this whole point, Brian.
Love it. Hey, just at the end, really quick, remember, if you registered, you should get the ultimate playbook to SDR onboarding in your inbox. Make sure you use your worksheet to go over this, to build your framework for onboarding SDRs. And then again, we're happy to talk about hiring SDRs onboarding at Vendition. We do it every month. Colin, I'll throw it back over to you to close us out.
Well, thanks, Brian. Really awesome talking to you, Hannah and Eddie, and prepping for this with the whole Vendition team. This is pretty fun. Yeah, send your worksheets. And I hope I get to see some of you next week and in May. I'll be in Boston, New York, San Francisco, Chicago. I can't make it to London, but somebody will be in London. We're getting Sales Hacker roadshows together. So food, drink, discussions. There'll be some interesting topics, really cool people. The guest list is stacked, but there's still room in each city. So go to saleshacker.com/roadshow22 and hope to see you there.